In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how I join my plain basic granny squares using the sewing method. I use this simple joining method on the granny square blanket that I make for my family. My blanket is made out of plain basic 6 rounds granny squares. I have a full tutorial where I shared how I crochet my squares. I will leave a link to this tutorial down below in the description box for you. In today's tutorial, I'll be joining these 4 squares, and for this little sample, I'll be using a contrast color for the joining. So the same yarn I used for the squares, but with a contrast color, just to make it easier for you to follow and to see all the little stitching details. In the blanket that I crochet for my family, I join with the same yarn and the same color I used for the squares. You can see here that I'm at the point where I join all the horizontal lines, and after I finish joining all my squares in the horizontal direction, I will be joining them in the vertical direction. So let's see how I join these squares. First, I want to make sure I have enough yarn to join my project, and I found out that I need 2 times the length of the project. So in this case, I'm going to be joining these 2 squares and then these 2 squares, starting in this point, joining all the way up to this point. So let's prepare double of this length and a little bit of extra yarn. And now I want to thread my yarn onto a tapestry needle, and I'm ready to join my squares. So I'm going to join my squares using the back loops only of each stitch. So let's take a look and make sure we see the back loop of each stitch. So let's start joining the first couple of squares. I want to place the squares one on top of the other so that the right sides facing each other and the wrong side facing out. And I know I have 3 chain stitches in each corner, in each square, and I want to start in the second stitch of the corner. So I go under the back loop of the second stitch, which is the middle stitch, the middle one of these 3 chain stitches, corner stitches, and then I go under the second stitch on the other square. Pull the yarn, leaving a little bit of a yarn tail, which I will weave in later. So now I'll go from this direction and I'll insert my needle under the back loop only of the next stitch. These are still corner stitches. And I want to give the yarn a little tug, not too tight and not too loose. Now I'll go from this direction under the next stitches from both squares. And I'm a left-handed, but if you are a right-handed, you will work with your right hand, I guess. Now I want to go from this direction under both back loops of both squares. And next 2 loops. And I want to make sure I don't split the yarn, and here I did. So I go backwards and I insert my needle again, making sure I insert it under the loop. Yeah, and now I'm at the stitch, which is the chain stitch between 2 clusters, and I want to make sure I have the next stitch is the chain stitch in this square and then in this square. And this way I make sure I keep my squares parallel and I use the same stitch in each of the squares. Next stitch. And here is a chain stitch again, and this is where I stop for a second and check that I go under both chain stitches in both squares. So yeah, as simple as that. I'll sew my stitches all the way up to the next corner, one after the other, using only back loops. Here I am at the next chain stitch between clusters. And this is the last stitch before the corner. And let's see how we join the corner stitches. So I want to join the next stitch, which is the first corner stitch, and then I want to end with the second stitch on the next corner. So it's the same stitch that I started with, the second stitch, the middle stitch in this corner, all the way up to the middle stitch in the next corner. And let's take a look and see how it looks now. So I use a contrast yarn in this tutorial just in order to show you how the stitch line looks like. And you can see these front loops that left from each square make this very nice and gentle line of joining. I like the way it looks. And now we are ready to move on and join the next couple of squares. So let's first face them one on top of the other, so the right side of each square facing each other and the wrong sides facing out. And I want to make sure I continue on the right direction, and this is how I do it. If I made my last stitch into this direction, now the first stitch of this square will go into this direction. So I want to insert my tapestry needle under back loops of the middle stitch in each square. So first I want to make sure to locate my tapestry needle into the right stitch. So this is the center stitch in this square, and this is the center stitch in this square. So I go from this direction to this direction. And now I want to give it a little tug and to make sure my squares are attached. And then I go under next loops. And don't worry if you still have a little gap between the squares, we will be fixing it later. So just like I joined my previous squares, I'll be joining the next couple. And now I want to stop and give my work a little tug and make sure my squares are being attached one to each other. And then I'll continue joining my squares all the way up to the middle stitch in the next corner. And this is the last stitch in this side. And now I want to make sure I have them joined in a relaxed tension, so I don't want to make any extra tension while I join, and this is the time for me to check it. And if I see I still have a little gap here in the meeting point, I'll give my yarn a little tug and we'll make them closer. So this is how it looks, and now we have this line joined. Let's move on and see how we join this line. So after I have all my horizontal lines joined, I'll start joining the vertical lines. So let's see how I do it. First, I want to prepare the length of the yarn that I need. So double the time of the length of my project and a little bit of extra. And I want to thread my yarn onto a tapestry needle. And now I want to fold my squares one on top of the other. And yeah, now you can see how it looks from the wrong side of the work. And now I'm ready to join the vertical lines. So just like I did before, I want to first see which is the middle stitch in each of the squares, the middle stitch in the corner. So this is the second stitch and this is the second stitch. And I'll go stitch by stitch and attach and join my squares together. So now I'm just about to reach this meeting point. And here is the next chain stitch in the next corner. Let's go under both loops of the chain stitch here of the first corner stitch. And next I want to go under the corner stitches again, so the middle stitch, which is already been used when we joined the vertical lines, but I want to go under it again, and then under the middle stitches on the next two squares. So it's this one and this one. Give it a little tug, and then the next stitch. And let's see how it looks on the right side. And this is how the joining point looks like. So you can see with the contrast yarn the stitches from both sides of the joining point. And I will continue joining my squares stitch by stitch using the back loop only of each stitch, making sure I go under the same stitches on both squares. So here I am at a chain stitch between two clusters and another chain stitch between two clusters on the other square. And this is the last stitch to join, middle chain stitch in the corner of this square and the middle chain stitch in the corner of the second square. And this is it. My squares are joined horizontally and vertically, and this is how it looks. And I want to make sure my seaming stitches are all relaxed and there is no extra tension in some parts of the squares. So this is the time to, give it a little stretch and see if it's all joined in a relaxed way and that my squares can sit one next to the other flat and relaxed. Yeah. And this is it. This is how I join my squares using the tapestry needle with the sewing method. Yeah, this is exactly what I do on my granny squares blanket with one color. And I like the way it looks. I like how clean and seamless this join looks. And after all my squares are joined, I'm ready for the final and the most enjoyable section, which is the framing or edging or whatever you like to call it. Yeah, I hope you will find it helpful. Leave me a comment down in the comment section and let me know if you tried it and if you find it helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!